Hello.
Hello.
Today we're here at LBI to meet Chris Clarke, who's Chief Creative Officer at LBI London and Global, which I guess is a bit of an introduction for you, Chris, but perhaps you'd like to say hello and introduce yourself.
Hello. Yeah. Well, as you said, I'm responsible for the creative people and the creative product across LBI, and also responsible for the sort of strategy and planning function, well, in terms of the creative planning part of it, anyway. Yeah.
Brilliant. And well, thanks of course for having us and Source here today. We're going to talk a little bit about your role and how you started in your career first of all. So what was your first role in the creative industry, and I guess how long ago was that?
I suppose it must be about 15 years ago now. I had an opportunity to work with an art director who needed a writer. I had absolutely no training whatsoever formally. I didn't go to college or do a creative course. In fact, I did an English literature degree. And was planning to go and do a sort of advertising course in college. Got an opportunity to get started and do some writing, and managed to be able to do it, and so never got around to doing that course, which I think actually has been hugely helpful. Advertising is not something that you should learn too much about. I don't think it's an academic discipline, so I think just doing it is good advice.
Well, I think that's brilliant, and it kind of rubbishes a few of my questions, but incredibly motivational for young people looking to get into creative industries. Well, like I said, kind of rubbish some of my questions, but someone's trying to get into a creative role. What advice would you give them, and maybe what do you look for when you hire someone?
I think one of the things that's very disappointing and a bit worrying at the moment is that we seem to have created an education system that produces identikit people who think in the same way. You know, I get very bored of seeing the same books with the same ad-like objects in, the same clever little end lines. You know, it's the same year in, year out. And you know, I was having a conversation with Graham Fink, who you probably know. You know, he's been doing this for a lot longer than I have, and he and I were both equally frustrated that the books look exactly the bloody same as they did when he started out. And so I think we have a crisis in our education system in general, and that is particularly acute, I think, sometimes in some of the advertising courses, where we're trying to give people the answer, trying to say that there's a formula for this stuff, and it's producing a real dearth of creativity, and quite often a very disappointing talent pool. So I actually think, in a funny kind of way, you could take that as a very motivating thing, in that to be able to stand out amongst so much similarity must be quite easy to do, really. Yeah. The problem is quite often when people set out to stand out, they set out to stand out in the same way. You know, we're all being alternative together, so you get the same sort of wacky ploys to sort of get into an agency. Actually, one of the best things that I came across in terms of a job application was a few years ago. A creative called Matt Stafford, who now works at Work Club, wanted to come and work with me here, and he created this thing called the Creative Relocation Programme. And I think if you Google Creative Relocation Programme, you'll probably find the awards entry that he did of it. It was absolutely fantastic. He sort of disguised himself, did an interview as though he'd been kind of kidnapped and wanted to be relocated, and even turned up for his interview in the office wearing the balaclava with the glasses over it. Eventually took the footage from our CCTV system here to create an awards movie out of it. You know, that's just having the balls and the confidence to do something. And you know, I'd like to see more people standing out and being different and thinking differently.
And do you think that's people taking the time to be true to themselves, to be really real, or you think it's a great creative idea that they've got the balls to deliver, as you said?
Yeah, a bit of both. But I mean, I think people do need to be true to themselves. I think it's another worrying trend at the moment that you know, because of the way in which the industry sort of relies on unpaid internships quite often, you know, perhaps because you know, it's pretty difficult to get a good stable position in the early stages of your career. We're beginning to see that advertising is becoming a profession for the privileged, and so you're only really seeing a lot of kids from, and you know, this is no discredit to people who come from privileged backgrounds who went to public school, but you know, a lot of the great advertising of the past was done by kids who came from, you know, quite humble backgrounds. I think they're struggling to make it through in the industry. I think the industry needs to work hard at that. And at helping people from diverse backgrounds get into the business. And so perhaps this is part of the problem. You're getting a lot of the same kinds of people with the same kinds of life experiences, going to the same kinds of colleges, being taught the same kinds of things, looking at the same kinds of you know, awards annuals, and you know, not very surprising that they then produce the same kinds of things. So I think people need to look for influences in unusual places, or I mean, they don't seem unusual to me, but I think that, I think look outside of advertising. Advertising itself doesn't have much to teach you. The great story of humanity is there to be found in other sources.
Yeah. And also I think education and industry, how they interact is a topic across all industries at the moment. It's a big subject.
Oh, absolutely. And what we need, what industry of any kind needs, is interesting people with ideas who understand other people. I think in particular now with the sort of, if you like, if you want to call it the social age, which I don't really like, but because every age really I think has been a social age, but the age where we have these big galvanizing platforms around how people socialize. I think the idea of putting people and insights about people and insights about what they care about, which is their friends and their family, at the heart of what you do, I think that makes sense. So you need people who are empathetic and who understand humanity. So you need people who are kind of part poet, part ethnographer, to sort of get under the skin of creative challenges now. What you don't need is people who've looked at a lot of awards annuals and who know how to write something a bit like something that won at Cannes last year. That's of no use to me at all.
Yeah. And people that can use the word ethnographer in interviews, that's what we need more of. So on the subject of skills, what kind of skills should someone be having as they enter the creative industry today, or is there a particular skill set that you think is important?
Well, look, I think that a lot of the core craft skills of typography, art direction, and writing are fantastically powerful and as useful as ever before. I think the ability to get stuff made is incredibly important. One of the things that we really find that we need is people who can come up with content ideas, or whether that's a film concept or a concept for an event or whatever it might be, and have an understanding of how that thing is going to reach an audience. So I think a sense of understanding distribution and understanding audiences is really important. It's no longer good enough, I think, just to write something that's a nice script, that's well written, or art direct something that looks good, because it's going to it meets its audience in a social space where often the reason why something is successful is not just down to how it looks or how well it's written. So people need to understand influence. They need to understand. Sorry, the shutters are going down in the background. It's not very helpful. They need to understand how content travels. So that's understanding how YouTube works, right? It's understanding who the big names are on YouTube at the moment. It's understanding who the most influential, bloggers, thinkers, journalists are in a given space, depending on what client you're working on. So we've got to go a lot deeper. I think creatives need media and distribution skill sets as much as they need core creative skill sets now.
Yeah, and I hear context. That creates context.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really key.
And people approaching, if someone's going to approach LBI, is it something they do? I'm not opening up the floodgates for you here, but do people approach LBI speculatively, or do they come and do internships, or how do people get into LBI?
Well, we get a huge amount of speculative applications, and I mentioned Matt Stafford's creative relocation program a few years ago. We get similar schemes, maybe not quite as ambitious as that all the time. We're pretty active with the colleges that we think are doing good things. We take a fair few people from Hyper Island, from School of Communication Arts 2.0, a bunch of other good colleges around the country where there are interesting people coming through the system. So we keep our eyes and ears open. I mean, we often also convert people from other disciplines as well. I think advertising at the moment, and communications in general, and digital, and especially with social content and this stuff, we need people perhaps from a TV creative background, not TV advertising, but actually in formats. So we pull in people who have experience of creating more long-form narratives. We hire a lot of journalists and ex-journalists, writers of all kinds. I mean, we often hire journalists into our planning department as well as into our creative department. So we try and create a pretty broad set of skills in our creative departments around the world.
Brilliant. Well, that's been fabulous insights into your views on how people get started in their career and how people might get started at LBI. So thanks for that, Chris.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and share it with others. Source interview people from London's creative industry so you can learn from their experiences. To see more of our videos, subscribe to the channel now. And if there's someone you'd like to see interviewed, even yourself, then tweet us, put it in the comments, or get in touch via email. Thanks again.